Now our second scene moves it along a little bit, and the key here that you want it's a longer scene, but there's a couple of things you want your friends to come away with. And the first thing, many of us just think that this is kind of like a story about the sacrifice of, or the test for Abraham on the sacrifice of his son. The key here is where it happened. It's in Moriah. It says that in the second paragraph in the italics. And then, now where is Moriah? Well, it's really, even though, as it says here in the key for insight, it's where Jerusalem later on is founded. Now in Abram's day there was no city there. So sometime later the temple is built in that area, and then Jerusalem as well, and then Jesus is sacrificed there. So Abraham is acting this out on a very central, what will become a very central spot for the rest of the Old Testament history. So why? Is it a coincidence? Or so you just want to get them thinking, well, why in the world is Abraham acting this out there? It's at least a fact that they should know about. So you don't tell them that, you just help them work through the key for insight. Right? The second thing that's important that ties into that is the naming of the place. And so you see here that Abram called that place the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. And what I want my friends in my discussion group to realize is that this is a future tense name. And so sometimes it's a little obvious observation, but it's so small that you might miss it. If the name is future tense and Abram is not looking into the past, where he's already sacrificed the ram that's replaced his son, then he would have said the Lord has provided. So the Abraham is naming that place future tense and specifying that on this place, the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. And then when you dovetail that with the fact that years later Jesus is sacrificed there, and he's the Lamb of God. See, there you're starting to build the pieces of the puzzle. Remember I said before, the threads that culminate in history. Now the way I don't want to tell my friends this, but I'll often say is, we'll read along and we'll do our observation questions, patterns, but when you're going converging, here I'll often say, we'll read, I'll say, let's read. He went over, took the ram, sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son, period. Then I'll ask, at this point, is the ram dead or alive?
It's dead.
Dead. And, but now, what does Abraham name the place? Is it past tense, present tense, future tense?
Future.
Future. So if Abraham was thinking of the ram that was provided for his son, he would have named it past tense. But he's not naming it past tense, so why? And really you want to dwell on the why. You don't have to be quick with the answer, but just so they notice something. And then you, as you tie that in with the place, there's a bit of a mystery there as why this person would have this acted out in this place. And so we know in hindsight again that it's Jesus who was provided 2,000 years later on that very mountain. So those are some things you want them to know when they...
I have a quick question for the riddle in 1 and 2. Do you want them to sit on these questions or just go straight to converging after they look at that? Because the converging has to do with the riddle.
Yeah, so I don't have them sit on it. I usually say, so here's some riddles, okay, and we might try, what do you think? And they might say, I don't know. And they might throw some out idea, and it's okay. So let's try to see if we can develop some, I guess what the converging does, some sort of clues to a riddle, so then we'll work our way through the converging, which is kind of an answer, or provide some clues for the riddle. So I don't spend a lot of time on the riddle, but if I put the riddle after, then they don't know why we're converging. We're converging to try to get some reason to the riddle.
Okay, good.
Okay, so that's the main idea of the second scene. The third scene is now the Passover. And the thing that you want your friends to realize is that this is the start of the Passover festival. The way I often explain it, it's like our Christmas in the West. It's every year this celebration happens. The very, how does it, what happens? And so they know that there's a death that goes through, and then some by blood painted on the door, it passes over. And what's key here to really unlock something is that Jesus 3,500 years later, is executed. He dies on the Passover, right? The Last Supper is part of the Passover. So that whole Passover week is where he's executed.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's one of those threads, and this is a foreshadowing of the death of Jesus. He is the Lamb who dies, whose blood is painted on the door, and death, spiritual death, is then passed over us.
Mm-hmm.
And so God is acting that out as almost like a play, a scene, so we can see it physically, and then we understand the full significance when we see Jesus. So that's what you want them to see by the end of it. And so why does the riddle, why does the blood of the Passover lamb stop the destroyer? Well, we don't really spell it out, and sometimes they might throw out some ideas and we may not know. Some people, even with the little they know, will guess maybe it's got something to do with Jesus when they realize it, but some don't. And if they don't guess it or they don't see it, I don't tell them.
Mm-hmm.
I say, hey, that's something we can see if we can understand later on. We might come back to it. So those are the main ideas that I wanted to at least leave. Question 4 on converging really makes you think about the universalness of the ability of the blood. It's not just a racial or religious. So so you can read between the lines with a footnote, and because there's Egyptians that had followed, that probably some Egyptians had painted blood on the door as well, and they would have been spared. So that's, though it doesn't say it specifically in the text. So that would bring us to the 3 scenes in Act 1, and all those scenes, they're not spoken prophecies, well, especially 2 and 3. They're something that's acted out by themselves. They just leave you some puzzles as to like the naming, but then in hindsight you see the fulfillment in Jesus. And as you move along, you may want to come back, and they start to get it, and you come back here.